obviously the Dieppe raid was a raid planned by a committee. And here's the committee. Here's Admiral Mountbatten, whose nickname was Dicky Mountbatten, along with all the British generals. And Dicky presents his plan. He says, all right, number one, the enemy defenses at Dieppe are weak. Number two, we'll take the enemy by surprise. Number three, we'll have a flank assault. That means we'll come in from the sides and attack from the rear. But someone put up their hand and said, oh, no, Churchill, we can't do that because we have these big tanks, these marvelous new Churchill tanks. We want to land on the beaches. Oh, all right then, no flank assault, just a frontal assault. Someone else said, we'll send in big bombers and we'll bomb the guns beforehand. And then when the Canadians come ashore, there won't be the guns firing on them. Someone else said, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. You'll kill some French people and they'll be very cross with us. And besides, the rubble will get in the way of our marvelous new tanks. Oh, all right then, no advanced bombardment, but we will have some fighter planes in the sky during the attack. Oh, that should do the trick. All right, jolly good. Then Mountbatten said, well, I'd like to have a huge battleship out in the channel with its huge guns firing on shore to provide cover for the Canadian men as they go ashore. But a British admiral said, a battleship in the channel, in broad daylight? You must be mad, Dicky. You must be absolutely mad. He didn't want to risk one of his giant battleships being hit by a German bomb. So they didn't want to risk a battleship. Oh, all right then, okay. No battleships, but we will give them 6 destroyers. Now, destroyers are very small ships, and they had guns that couldn't even reach the shore, as it turns out. But they thought that would do the trick. Then they said, we'll send in paratroopers. That got changed to commandos. But finally, well, we have these marvelous tanks, and they'll do the job for us. Now, even though everybody had been to Dieppe for their holidays and sat on the big pebbled beach, nobody remembered that pebbles are just the right size to get stuck in the treads of tanks and cause the tanks to break down, so they couldn't even get off the beach. Meanwhile, while all this marvelous planning is going on, the Canadians are training on the Isle of Wight. Training, commando training, practice raids. They don't know what for. Nobody's told them. But then they do some maneuvers. They do mock attacks on some British coastal towns, rehearsing Dieppe, though they don't know what it's for. It goes very badly. They're late. They're disorganized. But Montgomery said, oh, not to worry. The Canadians are first-class chaps. If anybody can pull this off, they can. So in July, the men of the 2nd Division, Canadian 2nd Division, are loaded onto ships off the Isle of Wight, southern coast of England, and they're told that they're going to strike the first blow at Hitler's Europe. Mountbatten comes on board, makes a speech on all the boats. They then cheer, they yell, they scream, they're so excited. They're finally going into battle. They're finally going to see some action. And they're told they'll attack at dawn the next day. However, at dawn when they wake up, they're still in the boats. Why? Well, the winds aren't right for the paratroopers. They need to drop men in parachutes before the battle, and the winds are wrong. Next day, same thing. The men are getting frustrated. Why aren't we going? What's going on? No, we have to wait for the winds to be right for the paratroopers. Well, 5 days go by, 6 days go by. On the morning of the 7th day before dawn, there's a squadron of Focke-Wulf German fighter planes cruising over the channel. They look down and they see all of these enemy ships. Whoopee, what a target. 2 of them swoop down. Each fighter plane carries 1 bomb. He swoops down to 2 of the biggest ships, each of them carrying 1,000 Canadians. He swoops down, drops his bomb, hits the ship. It goes right through the first ship, right through all the decks, down through the bottom of the hull and out, and explodes in the water. Some men are wounded. Miraculously, no one is killed. If it had exploded inside the ship, 1,000 men would have been obliterated instantly. Then another one swoops down on the second ship, drops a bomb. My friend Fred Engelbrecht was sleeping on the deck. The bomb came crashing through the ceiling above him, the deck above him, onto the deck he was sleeping on. It didn't explode. It was very hot. It started skidding around. It ran right down the leg of his friend Murphy. Murphy screams because his leg is on fire, basically. And he thrashes about, and by so doing, kicks the bomb off the deck. It skids off the deck, under the railing, and into the ocean, and explodes. Again, if it had exploded on the ship, another 1,000 Canadians would have been instantly killed. So they bring the ships on shore, they march the men off. Now, of course, the enemy knows that a big raid was planned, so they tell them the Dieppe raid is canceled. They're so disappointed, they cry. Men literally break down and cry. They're sent back to army camps in England, and they go into the pubs and they tell everybody, oh well, we were going to raid Dieppe, but it's all off now. It's not going to happen. Meanwhile, Joseph Stalin, the leader of Soviet Russia, is getting more and more angry. He sends a threatening telegram to Winston Churchill, Britain's prime minister, and says, invade France or else. If you don't do something to take the heat off us, we're dying by the thousands, we will make a separate peace with Hitler, and you're in the war on your own. We're out of the war. So Churchill's in a jam. He calls in the same committee of generals, says, what are we going to do? And Mountbatten sticks up his hand and says, well, we could always invade Dieppe. And everybody laughs. They think he's joking. He said, no, I'm serious. If we don't raid Dieppe, there's no chance for any other raid this summer. And besides, the enemy would never think we were stupid enough to go to the same place twice. Dieppe would be the last place they'd be expecting us. Oh, Dickie, you're making sense. So all of a sudden, 5,000 Canadians are put on the boats once again. And Fred, or I think it was Ron Reynolds, another one of my veterans, said, somebody whispered to me, you know, we're going to Dieppe. And he said, oh, don't be silly. That was last time. We're not going to Dieppe. Then they find out they are going to Dieppe. And this time there's no cheering. As the men said to me, we knew we were in for it if they're sending us back to the same place. So that night, under the cover of darkness, ships cross across the channel, filled with mines. They get close to the shore. Now the novel, which I don't have time to read to you, unfortunately, is called Prisoner of Dieppe, and it's about two boys from Toronto, and it's all true. Everything in this book really happened. They were from the Royal Regiment, which suffered the worst casualties of any regiment at Dieppe. They were to attack Blue Beach, near the little town of Pouilly, just outside Dieppe. They were supposed to arrive under cover of darkness, but they were delivered late. So they got there at dawn, and all along the cliffs, the enemy was just waiting for them. And as their landing craft came ashore, they were hit by devastating gunfire, artillery fire, mortar fire, machine gun fire. One of them said it was just like landing in hell. We had no chance at all. And overhead there were aircraft. And the Canadians came ashore nonetheless. And in the book I describe what it was like to have steel bullets bouncing off the, and for these two young men to lose all of their friends. So here's the enemy firing down from the cliff tops. Within an hour, there are hundreds of Canadians lying dead by the seawall. Hundreds of them. Others wounded. It was an absolute disaster. And the problem with the Dieppe raid is that if one part of it failed, all of it would fail. Because Blue Beach failed, then the men attacking at Red and White Beach in front of the main town had no chance either. But nonetheless, a small group of men from Hamilton, Ontario, from the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry, managed to take the casino that was filled with enemy soldiers and flush out the casino. And they radioed back to their commander, who was in a command ship. And the whole town, the whole coast is covered in smoke, so they don't know what's going on. And he radioed back, casino taken. The commander thinks, great, it's going well. Send in reinforcements. So he sent in the men of the Fusiliers Mont-Royal, the FMRs from Quebec. And they came through the smoke screen and saw the beach littered with Canadians and thought, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. But the word didn't get out to the commanders until about 11 o'clock. And he had to give the order vanquish, which means withdraw. And he tried to bring the boats into shore to rescue some of the hundreds and hundreds of men who were there. But of course the fire was so intense that they couldn't get close to shore. So they left and went back to England, leaving behind 1,000 men dead or dying on the beach, hundreds more wounded, and about 2,000 men who now have to surrender. It's why they call it our darkest day. And some of the veterans I've talked to said, you wouldn't believe the waves. The waves were red. It was like someone had poured red ink into the waves as body parts and pieces of broken men are washed onto the shore. But despite this terrible carnage, there are individual stories of tremendous heroism. Chaplain John Foote didn't carry a rifle, he carried a Bible, and he was pinned down on the beach. And all around him he saw wounded men. So he stood up in incredible gunfire, picked up a wounded man, took him out to the boats, came back and got another and another, and then he organized other men who weren't too badly wounded to take wounded men out into the waves to the boats. And as the boats were leaving, they grabbed Chaplain Foote. And he said, wait a second, they don't need me in England. These men need me. My place is with the boys. So he jumped into the water, went back to the beach to surrender, and endure 2.5 years of brutal treatment in prison camp. And after the war, he was given the Victoria Cross, the highest award for valor in the British Commonwealth. Here are the Canadians marching through the streets of Dieppe after the surrender. Many of them are missing shoes, they're missing boots, they're without their shirts. You see how young many of them are, 18, 19, 20 years old. They're marching off defeated. They were given no water and no food. They were marched out of town. Of course, many of them were wounded. There were hundreds wounded, and the Dieppe hospital couldn't possibly care for them all. So they were sent eventually by trucks, because there were German wounded as well. They were sent by trucks to Rouen. And in the hospital at Rouen was a 19-year-old French nun named Sister Agnes Marie. Sister Agnes was told she should only care for the Germans and just leave the Canadians to die. But after hours, she went into the wars. She snuck back into the hospital, and she cared for wounded Canadians and saved many of their lives. And a man I met who was blinded during the battle remembers Sister Agnes whispering in his ear, "It's going to be all right. I'm going to take care of you. I'm a French nun. I'll look after you, mon petit soldat, mon petit Canadien."